In our last video, it was established that disease is not caused by microorganisms or viruses. Medicine itself concedes this when it uses the excuse of susceptibility to account for why the germ is often found in asymptomatic people. With so much writing on susceptibility, then, any astute observer would wonder why we aren't hearing anything about how to make ourselves less susceptible from our public health experts. The truth is, even the term susceptibility is a misuse of language because it implies vulnerability to attack. This is clearly a misrepresentation since there are no attackers. There's only the inner terrain of the body in a clean or polluted state. How to create a clean internal terrain is a topic that has become awash in confusion and obfuscation. Unfortunately, now more than ever, commerce drives the information stream just as it drives most research. When we go looking for information about how to be healthy, we usually find what makes people money instead of the truth. The profit motive is what causes confusion and controversy to reign in the areas of human health and nutrition. When the question of how humans should be living in order to enjoy health is objectively examined, there's no controversy. Natural laws and principles of science are just as fixed and certain when they are applied to human health as they are when applied to any other subject, like chemistry, mathematics, or astronomy. These natural laws and conditions are explicitly delineated by natural hygiene, the biological science that concerns itself with the factors that produce health. Natural hygiene has posited 23 of these factors, which we will go into more detail in a future video. For this video, we want to focus on one specific area because it's the most difficult to find truthful information about and has been the most perverted in modern civilization. This one factor is the greatest influencer on our health because in large part it creates our internal chemistry, which sets the stage for either health or disease. This factor is the diet. Once again, Lauren and I will be posing a series of questions to Robert. Before we start, let me quickly reintroduce you to each of us. My co-host today is Lauren Whiteman, administrator for the Terrain Model Refutes Germ Theory Facebook group and author of the website vibeandveggies.com. In addition to teaching natural hygiene principles in the Terrain Model group, Lauren also takes in shelter dogs with what are considered by modern medicine as incurable progressive conditions, and by following the principles of natural hygiene, she's managed to return these sick dogs back to pristine health. Robert Rust is a graduated mechanical engineer with over 30 years experience in natural hygiene. He has a PhD from the life science course proctored by T.C. Fry. He has studied with a number of natural hygiene experts and pioneers over the last 30 years, including T.C. Fry, Vivian Vetrano, and Ralph Cinque, and attended numerous natural hygiene retreats where he helped to introduce others to the principles of natural hygiene and healing. And my name is Nora Lenz. I've been practicing natural hygiene for about 20 years. I'm the author of the book Dog Nutrition 101, which is only available on my website, nomorevetbills.com. I have a website devoted to natural hygiene as it applies to human health as well, called rawschool.com. I'm also the owner of the Facebook group Healing Diet for Dogs and Cats, where we teach pet owners the principles of natural hygiene to return their pets back to a state of health. Now I'll hand it over to Lauren to get us started.
Thank you, Nora. Let's jump right in by talking a little bit about the natural human diet, how this has been determined, and what we know from anatomy and physiology about what we should be eating. Robert, how has the natural human diet been determined, and what are the factors that are looked at in order to determine our natural diet?
The natural diet of the human being has been determined by studying biology, particularly its anatomy and physiology.
Okay, and is there a body of knowledge which has taken this information and used that information to determine how humans should eat and put it into action for people to heal?
Yes, there's one body of knowledge that has studied biology, physiology, and anatomy, and that's natural hygiene. The terrain model does it as well to a degree. This studied natural hygiene by studying the physiology of the body, the biology of the human being, has determined those needs of life that are necessary to follow for the human to achieve health.
Okay. And most people believe that humans are omnivores. Is this the most accurate classification for our species, or is there a more accurate classification that we should be using?
No, biology has studied the various types of species on the planet, and they've classified them according to the diet. So we end up with 6 classifications or so. We have herbivores, which are plant eaters, carnivores, which are meat eaters, insectivores, such as birds, and graminivores, also birds, and say mice. And then we have frugivores, and then we have omnivores. Omnivores can eat herbs or foliage, plants, and animals. Frugivores are a creature that eats primarily fruit as its diet. So this comparison between creatures can establish which diet is appropriate for species that are similar to each other. The human being is a frugivore. This can be determined by studying its physiology and its anatomy, the features of it that are harmonious with fruit eating. We can also use comparative science, comparative anatomy and physiology to see how we are similar to those creatures in nature that are frugivores, not carnivores and so forth.
Okay. So humans are then in the classification of frugivore, not omnivore. What does the natural human diet consist of then? If we are frugivores and primarily fruit eaters, what is our natural diet?
The natural diet that suits all the human's anatomy and physiology is fruit, primarily fruit. The human can also eat vegetables, nuts, and seeds. Those are an important part of the diet. It's very usable. The fruit is the most harmonious with the human's biology because all the nutrients within it perfectly match our abilities, our digestive abilities, our metabolic abilities, and our senses.
Okay, and how does fruit match our anatomy?
Our anatomy enables us to eat, to find, to digest food, fruit. Fruit appeals to all our senses. For example, colors, fruits come in all kinds of colors, and we are attracted to colors through our sight. Fruits are very fragrant, they have many aromas, very strong, and this appeals to our sense of smell. The human doesn't have a very strong sense of smell. This is because fruits provide so much fragrance. Unlike a carnivore, for example, has to have a very powerful sense of smell because meat doesn't produce many odors at all. They can smell a piece of meat 200 feet away, whereas a human can't smell it 3 inches away, unless it's rotten. So further anatomy is our teeth, perfectly designed to eat fruit. We have fairly dull incisors in the front for taking chunks out of fruit, biting into it, not slicing, taking a chunk out. We have no canine teeth for ripping and shredding. Our teeth are not sharp, such as the carnivores are. Our rear teeth aren't huge molars. They're smaller molars, and they're ideal for crushing. Our jaw does not rotate as it chews like a herbivore does, which has to grind its food, grinding seeds, grinding vegetation. Our jaw just closes, and that's ideal for just crushing fruit, which is very soft in the first place and doesn't need grinding. It just needs a crushing, a gentle crushing. We don't have teeth for grinding hard objects. We usually chip our teeth. We don't like hard objects like seeds in our mouth, or rocks, or bones, things that herbivores don't mind, and carnivores. Our teeth aren't sharp. Carnivores have very sharp teeth for biting into and shredding meat quickly. They swallow it whole. Our mouth and our swallowing mechanism is designed to swallow very liquid food. If it's solid and we swallow it, it will choke us, whereas a carnivore will take a chunk out of a animal and swallow it whole. They have very powerful digestion in their stomach that will then disintegrate or digest that food. The human being has a long digestive tract, whereas a carnivore has a very short digestive tract, maybe 6 feet or so. The human digestive tract is about 30 feet long. So you'll see a cow eating its food, passes into its stomach, and then regurgitates it back up to chew it as cud, to work it over more. It's very fibrous. Humans do not have that at all. We have a system that's designed to just absorb liquid nutrients out of food quite easily over a long period of time. The fruits are not high in proteins and fat, so they don't decompose and produce fermented products that are toxic to a body. At the most, they ferment, which are very toxic substances to the body. Carnivore has a short digestive system and very powerful digestion. It secretes a lot of acids and so forth into the food to rapidly break it down and then absorb what it needs out of it and then get rid of the waste. So these are some features. We have also opposable thumbs on our hands and delicate fingers, long fingers for picking fruit. This is ideal for reaching into bushes in the trees and picking the fruit of various types, sizes, and textures. We have very sensitive touch that way. We don't have fur-covered hands. We can reach into bushes or through trees with our arms. We have legs. We're upright. We can look up. We're attracted to things above the ground. We're agile. We can climb into trees or reach through bushes to get our fruit. These are all features of our body that are perfectly suited for getting fruit. We're attracted to colors. When fruit ripens, it turns colors. When it's not ripe, it's green, so we don't spot it within foliage. But once it ripens, it stands out. We're attracted to green. We like green trees, bushes, and so forth. And we are tuned into noticing bright objects in them, which will be fruit. That's our sight. Our smell, like I said, we have a weak sense of smell. We don't need a powerful sense of smell because of the fragrance of fruit in its great variety. Our taste senses sweetness, saltiness, bitterness, and acidity. And this allows us to determine when a fruit is ripe, when it's not ripe, and when it's overripe. That would be sour, overripe, and underripe, bitter, and salty. Well, there's low levels of salts within fruit, and so we'll pick that up. But once a substance becomes too high in salt, it starts to burn us. And so saltiness is something that we'd want at low levels. The sugar in fruit, that appeals greatly to us. We love sugar because that's the fuel source of the human body. And fruit provides lots of sugar in its natural form, fructose or levulose. And the body doesn't have to do much work on that in order to get that as a fuel source. So we're very attracted to sweet. We love it. It has to be combined with, of course, fats and other nutrients, water. We don't have any drinking facilities, such as an animal such as a carnivore has a long snout, or a herbivore, they can drink water. If we try to drink water out of a pool, we get our face wet or nose wet, and that's unpleasant. The reason why we haven't developed any anatomy like that is because we get our water out of fruit, which is very high in water content, anywhere from like 75% to 95%. Very rich in water. And this provides all the water needs of the body for transporting and getting rid of waste and so forth.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. So, it's very interesting because dogs, we know, don't have a great range of colors that they see. They're limited in the scope of the colors. Yet humans, we have a really great range of colors that we see. And so it's so interesting to realize that the reason that we can see, whereas an omnivore dog cannot see, is because we are attracted to those colors in order to find our food. Okay, so we've covered anatomy. How does fruit match our physiology?
The physiology is our actual chemistry in action, anatomy being the structure that we are, created by our chemistry. So our body produces certain substances such as enzymes, acids, hormones, and so forth that allow it to take advantage of the nutrients that are in fruit. Now, fruit, when it ripens, produces these nutrients that we need, such as amino acids and fatty acids and minerals and vitamins and so forth. And we take them into our cells and they're basically broken down to their simplest form. So we don't have to do too much digestion on them. And so the human being has very weak digestion compared to all other classifications of animals, carnivores, herbivores, insectivores. The fruit that we eat, fruit is low in vitamins, relatively low in protein and fats. We don't need very much of those. It's higher in the sugars. We need those. And it's high, of course, in water. So our production of enzymes is much lower. Our production of acids, such as hydrochloric acid, is much lower than, say, a carnivore production. We don't need it because our food that we eat, our natural food, is already broken down into amino acids. The other parts of our physiology would be our sense of smell, for example. Our nerves create their chemical metabolisms within the cell that can pick up the fragrances, the aromas from fruit. And we're particularly sensitive to those odors and attracted to them, whereas carnivores and herbivores, they're not attracted to these fragrances. They're attracted to other things like meat or greenery and so forth, which don't produce much odors. The process of nutrition is the process of life. Cellular life is always feeding. Organic life, organisms are feeding. That's how they're maintaining themselves. And so the foods that we eat allow us to maintain that metabolism. And so we'll see that all our senses, our whole structure, all our beingness, all our chemistry is perfectly suited for fruit eating the type of food that we evolved with to establish our anatomy and physiology. Our mouth produces salivary amylase, also called ptyalin, and that's a starch-breaking enzyme. When fruit ripens, it doesn't perfectly ripen, has simple sugars, but also some starches, so we can digest that as well with our salivary amylase. Whereas a carnivore produces no amylase. It just produces protein-type enzymes. It has acidic saliva. We have alkaline saliva. All right. We humans don't secrete uricase, and that's an enzyme that's necessary to break down uric acid, which is produced from protein digestion. The human being doesn't produce very much hydrochloric acid. When it does, that's called acid stomach, acid reflux, and heartburn. Carnivores secrete enormous amounts of hydrochloric acid and the appropriate enzymes to break down the proteins then. Our mouth doesn't secrete fat-breaking enzymes because our food is low in it, and the fruit is already digested, so it has fatty acids instead of fats. We create substances through our liver that it then injects into the small intestine to digest some fats. That's through your bile. These are physiological features of the human that allow it to digest fruit ideally. We can compare our physiology and our anatomy to animals in nature that have similar, such as the great apes. If you would take the intestines of, say, a bonobo or a orangutan and put it on the table and then put human intestines right beside it, you could not tell the difference between them. Same length, same structures, everything. You'd have to do a chemical test to look at the DNA to determine which came from what. We're practically identical to them. We share 90 up to 99% of our DNA, our genes, with the great apes. We don't come from great apes, we're their cousins. We've evolved alongside of them. We have a common ancestor, maybe 5 million and more millions of years before now. We share that with great apes. We're still very close. We have the same anatomical features and physiological features as the great apes. They have legs they stand on, they have opposable thumbs, they have facial features similar to us, they have the same enzymes that they produce like us, long intestines, their behavior is very social like us, they're attracted to fruits and remain very healthy on it. So this is how we determine our own dietary needs: physiology, anatomy, and comparative physiology and anatomy.
Hey, great, thank you. So what does fruit provide for us as far as nutrition, proteins, fats, minerals, vitamins, etc.?
Okay, that food substance, which is a species' natural food, will provide all the nutrients that it needs. It will appeal to all the species' senses. Our natural food is fruit, and it provides all the nutrients, and these are vitamins, protein, fats, minerals, and other trace chemicals, oxones, small amounts of chemicals that allow the body to gain all that it needs, all the nutrients it needs, and they have water in them, high levels of water. Fruit provides this plentifully. Other foods, substances don't. They give us excess proteins, excess fats, and so forth. The human being doesn't have a great need for protein. When a human infant is growing, the time of life when humans are growing the most, it feeds on mother's milk, which only has about 1% protein in it. Fruit is very close to that, slightly less. But it's like when someone builds a house, you use bricks or wood. Once your house is constructed, you don't need any more building materials. Protein is a building material for cell structure. It's also used in the operation of chemicals or the metabolism of the body. The body itself, our cells, recycle most of the protein that they have or create. So our protein needs are met mostly by our recycling our own protein waste. Cells disintegrate and their structure is reused by the rest of the body. We get about 60–70% of our protein needs met by recycling, and then we only need maybe 30% or so from our food that we eat. That ends up that we maybe need 20–25 grams of protein a day, not 90–100 grams as modern nutrition promotes. Likewise, we don't have a great need for fat. We have a great need for sugar. That's the fuel that the cells of the body use. They use glucose. It's converted to a chemical called ATP, which is then recycled until it's ultimately broken down into just carbon dioxide and water, which is then eliminated by the body. Some water is retained for transporting nutrients and getting rid of waste. So we're looking for something that has high levels of sugar and lower levels of proteins and fats. But vitamins are just enzymes, actually coenzymes, and our body uses those to help activate its own enzymes that it uses to break down proteins, fats, and sugars, process all these. That's called the metabolism of the body. We don't need many enzymes because they're always reused. They're molecules that are incite breakdown of chemicals, but they themselves don't get destroyed or changed in the process. They're reused over and over. So it is that we use vitamins over and over. We don't need a great supply, and our body stores them in the liver and cells and other areas. And the trace minerals, the minerals in food, those are salts that are incorporated within the structure of the food with the water and the fat and the vitamins and the proteins. by organic life, by living organisms. In that form, it is available for us to use these minerals. They're not available in a rock form, it's a crystallized form. It's missing water, vitamins, minerals, the whole combination of nutrients that are part of food. So this is what fruit provides us, all our basic nutrients, including water. Large amount of water. Our body is 70% water, and our foods need to reflect that so we don't put our body into shock when you eat our foods. It absorbs food that matches it. And this is the case with fruit. All right?
Robert, before we move on, what you said just a second ago was that we don't need enzymes because our bodies reuse the enzymes that we have. And a lot is said in raw food circles about how important it is to eat raw food because it has the enzymes in it. Can you talk a little bit about the difference between the enzymes in food and the enzymes in our bodies?
That's a good point. Enzymes are used by an organism, they're produced by an organism to break down its food, to help run its metabolism. We create our own enzyme. Each organism does that. But we see that in fruit. A plant grows a fruit in order to reproduce itself. If the fruit has seeds in it, what's called the mesocarp, that's the surrounding of the fruit, then is ripened. Enzymes within that structure that the plant grows break down the cell walls of the cells that are in the fruit and make it up. They break down the proteins, the fats, the minerals, and so forth into very simple components, such as proteins to amino acids, fats to fatty acids and glycerol. And our body then can absorb those nutrients, and we produce any enzymes we need to further the breakdown. We don't need the enzymes of the fruit, because the fruit did that on its own. It did it with its enzymes. We will digest any enzymes that it has, just like we will digest the proteins that are in it, break them down into amino acids, basically what enzymes are, a special type of protein, and use them to create our own human protein out of those amino acids. And these human proteins will be the structure, part of the structure of our cell walls, the cell's interior, our organs, and so forth. All right, so we don't need to be eating enzymes. We need to be eating foods that contain the basic normal nutrients that we eat, the primary one being sugars with high volumes of water. And next is quantities of proteins and fats, and then much lower quantities of vitamins and minerals.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Robert. So one of the biggest hurdles people think in eating the natural human diet these days is that our soils have become depleted, and that then therefore the nutrients aren't available in the fruit, and so in their mind they should be eating something different or supplementing in order to make up for this lost nutrients. So can you talk a little bit about how much nutrients we actually need, and is there a legitimate concern about the loss of nutrients in the soils affecting our abilities to eat our natural diet?
Yes. Well, the fact is that the human doesn't need a lot of nutrients. Its greatest need, of course, is fuel, and that's sugar. We need some building blocks such as proteins in the form of amino acids to just repair ourselves a little bit here and there, replace those proteins we made that broke down. We don't have great needs for it. And the foods that do grow in nature that we do use are still high in those nutrients. And when we get too much of those nutrients, that actually acidifies the body. When we eat foods, and there's protein in it and fats, we have to break that down into amino acids and fatty acids. And our body likes to have a certain acidity level. And if it goes beyond that too high, it will start to act symptomatically because the acidity prevents oxygen transfer in the body, which then prevents cells from being able to operate and run normally. They become irritated, the cells, like nerve cells, become irritated by the excess acidity and feel discomforted. These are all symptoms. So when we're getting excess, we're getting symptoms, which means disease. So when we eat our foods, we just want them at the appropriate levels. The foods that we grow in our soils, that they can grow and are turning into fruits and vegetables and so forth, means they're getting enough nutrition out of the soil, nutrients, to grow into those. All foods have different levels of various nutrients, and so long as a person eats a varied diet, they're going to get all the nutrients they need. In reality, what's happening is humans are getting too much food, too many nutrients into them. They're forcing their body to do too much work, and thereby becoming over-acidic, and thereby reacting to that acidity, which we call symptomatic behavior, disease. So it's more necessary to make sure you don't get too much rather than too little. It's very difficult to get too little, and just maybe lose weight, and you have to eat a bit more. Our food easily provides whatever soil it's grown in, nutrients that we need. It won't grow otherwise. It's true that some soils are overworked, chemicals are put on them to stimulate growth, abnormal growth, and those won't be as nutrient rich as a wild growing fruit, for example. But it still has a lot of nutrients and high levels, and we can get by on that quite easily. Disease is created by getting too much excess, too much work on the body, not by too little, right? It's excess. Our diseases are a symptom of excess, not a symptom of deficiency. Where there would be a deficiency, that comes with an excess of something, an imbalance. All right?
And it's true that the tree or the vine that produces the fruit has to get sufficient nutrition from the soil in order to reproduce itself. So it wouldn't produce fruit at all if the nutrients weren't there, right?
Yeah, exactly. The fruit needs the tree or the bush, the plant needs all that it can get, all that it gets from the soil, which is bacteria. It's basically feeding off bacteria in the soil and other organisms in there. And it gets it all, otherwise it wouldn't be able to grow into itself. It can get excess, it can get too much water, and then it doesn't grow properly. It can get exposed to poisonous substances like too much iron or rust or some toxic chemical that would kill the plant or cause it to grow improperly. Mm-hmm. But generally, fruit are all growing, and vegetable plants are growing very well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just like humans get sick, plants can get sick if their terrain is not appropriate, if they're not getting the right nutrients from the soil, the right sun, the right water. Just like, if we get sick, if we have too much food coming in, not enough fresh water, fresh air, etc.
If we eat the wrong foods, we become infertile.
Exactly. So, all right. Okay. Nora, you want to go ahead and take over?
Yeah, the questions I'm going to ask now will relate to key points to understand about the biologically appropriate human diet and common misconceptions about nutrition. So the first question is, what is meant when it is said that fruit is predigested for us?
All right. We had gone over this briefly. Fruit is predigested by the plant that grew it, meaning the plant produces enzyme within the fruit that break down that fruit, the structure of it into a simpler structure. So the proteins within the fruit are broken into amino acids. The fats are broken into fatty acids and glycerol. And if there's carbohydrates in it, complex ones, those are broken down into sugars. So if there's any cellulose in the fruit, it's broken down into starches, and then into simple sugars, basically fructose, which is the same as glucose, just a little rotation in a hydrogen atom, which occurs in transfer through the stomach or intestinal walls. Fructose gets right away transferred, converted into glucose, so it's immediately ready for cells with barely any work done on it. That's the predigestion of fruit by the fruit. That's the plant saying, here, take this food substance I made for you, eat it, and spread the seed that's in it around so that I can grow into a new tree somewhere and spread my own self.
Right. That's our job in nature, right? We're seed disseminators.
That's right. We work symbiotically with plants. We
Right.
spread their seeds and they give us food. They create oxygen, their waste product, and we breathe that in to sustain ourselves. And we breathe out carbon dioxide, which they take in as food. So we're symbiotic creatures, and life is symbiotic.
Mm-hmm.
It helps promote itself, working together.
Right. Okay, next question. Is it true that humans need meat because we would be deficient in B12 without it? Do humans need to supplement this nutrient if they were going to be eating their natural diet?
No, the human doesn't have to take any supplements because its natural food provides all that it needs: proteins, fats, vitamins, minerals, and so forth, water. Vitamin B12 is produced in the human's own gut. Vitamin B12 isn't found in vegetation or in, well, it's found in animals, but not in fruit and vegetation. Fruit and vegetation don't need it. Humans create it themselves by ingesting their foods, create an environment within their guts, which is actually outside their body proper, which breaks down that food. And the food itself, through its microsomes that were in it, the DNA structure, creates that molecule, vitamin B12, which we then absorb through our intestines into our body as we need it. We don't have great needs for it, and it's recycled by the body, reused and so forth, like the rest of the enzymes and coenzymes that the body uses. We don't have to worry about that. Nature's taking care of that and all this complexity through billions of years of evolution. We don't have to take supplements. Our food contains it. To take a supplement, is to admit that the diet is incorrect, right? Supplements are crystalline forms, purified forms of food substance. They've been heated and purified into rock crystals. And it is not proper for the human to eat rock to get us nutrition. We want to eat substance that's juicy and full of nutrients, other nutrients, all combined together in balance, not separated as separate mineral ingredients or carbon ingredients and so forth.
Mm-hmm. And this idea that a diet without animal products would naturally be deficient in B12 has been pushed so much by various industries, including the meat industry, mostly the meat industry, that people have in their minds that whatever symptoms they might experience during dietary transition might be related to that. And so they then take the B12 supplement or whatever, and they find that their symptom goes away. And that's just a misinterpretation of the symptom, right? You've just suppressed the symptom. You haven't done anything. You haven't given your body anything that it was lacking.
No. Symptoms of the disease are from excess. And specifically,
Right.
It'll be excess. Usually it's excess acidity. Most metabolic breakdown products being acidic. You can get excess alkalinity, but that's much less common. The breakdown products of metabolism are carbon dioxide, which forms carbonic acid, a weak acid in liquid, in water. The body is 70% water. So carbon dioxide in our body forms a weak acid. The breakdown of proteins creates amino acids, another acid, and fatty acids, and nucleic acids, hydrochloric acid, and a whole assortment of other acids in producing the energy of the body. So it's necessary for us to minimize that acidity, to get rid of those acidic waste so that our body maintains its normal pH, bloodstream being a pH of 7.35 to 7.45. To go out of that range is to threaten the life of the body, to put it into unconsciousness or a coma, and to ultimately kill it. If we go below a pH of 7, that means we're dead. All right? The body won't do that. It'll spend all of its efforts to prevent that from happening, no matter what it can do. It's trying to save itself. All right, now, when we eat meats and so forth, we're over providing ourselves with proteins and fats and so forth, and that saturates our body with acidic waste, and we then act symptomatically. This is disease. It's about excess. When we transition and start to eat a better diet, we're getting rid of all that waste, that excess, and enabling our body to operate efficiently and well. And that is then experienced as health. All right.
Right. But in the meantime, during transition, people might experience some transitional symptoms as their body continues to clean out. And one of those symptoms is weakness. And that happens to be one of the symptoms that's associated with B12 deficiency, according to, some sources, meat sources. So they need to stop misinterpreting their weakness as deficiency and see it as what it really is, right? Just transitional.
Yeah, weakness is a symptom. There's many symptoms. When a person eats a very concentrated diet, such as a high protein diet or a high carbohydrate diet, like a starchy diet, potatoes and so forth, they're giving their body too many nutrients all at once without enough water, and the body protects itself from that. It's like, say, a person starts shoveling, hasn't shoveled ever, they develop blisters, right? And then if they shovel slowly and increasingly, then they'll build up calluses to protect their insides of their body from that irritation from shoveling. So a person eating concentrated protein will develop thicker skins in its intestinal walls and cellular skins to protect the cell from absorbing too much all at once. Now, when a person improves their diet, that extra thickness, those layers, take time to remove. And so when you eat a food such as fruit that is light in those nutrients, you don't absorb much of that. You need to give your body time to remove its structures that are protecting itself from excess. All right.
Mm-hmm.
That means the body at that time won't be producing as much energy. It won't be absorbing sugars enough and proteins and fats, as dilute as they are, to create its energy. And that's experienced as weakness. Right. Another thing that's happening when you're in transition, your body is then going to stores, fat stores and protein stores and so forth, and reusing those. But in that is waste, substance that was stored, such as excess acids or poisons ingested in the body, and those give the body trouble in eliminating them, right? And so the acidity of the body can increase, and that reduces oxygen transfer to the cells. And the cells need always a supply of oxygen to create their chemistry, to run themselves, to run the body. And so their energy drops, and that's experienced as weakness. All right?
Mm-hmm. Okay, next question. A common objection to a fruit-centered diet is that it's too much sugar. It has too much sugar. Can you explain where this fear of sugar came from? And is there any danger in eating too much sugar?
Well, that fear came from refined sugar. Refined sugar is heated, purified sugar from beets or whatever substance, food substance. And it is lacking all of its other nutrients that would normally been with it, such as carbohydrates, proteins, water, principally. And you're basically eating a rock. The body does need sugars, and it will use that, but it depletes itself of all its stored nutrients, its own self, to process that sugar. So it breaks down, it's starting to malfunction. So that's the danger in eating sugar. That sugar is sucrose. It's a double sugar. Our natural sugars come in fruit, and they have high water content and appropriate low protein and fat levels and appropriate levels of vitamins and minerals. In that, we don't have to be afraid of sugar. We only have, if we overeat, that's a problem, but then we're getting too much of every nutrient, including water. Right? So now, medicine doesn't understand the true needs of the body. And so when a person gets a breakdown, a disease such as, say, diabetes, they blame that on sugar consumption. Diabetes is actually a problem of excess protein consumption, because the acidity of the proteins, the excess proteins turned into amino acids, irritates and poisons the pancreas, which is producing the enzymes such as insulin for sugar absorption into the body. Another problem is when a person eats fats, excess fats, these prevent the absorption of sugar into cells. They coat, when you eat fats with, say, sugars, the fat coats the sugar and prevents, or the starch, the carbohydrate, it prevents it from being broken down by enzymes that the body is creating to break down the sugar. All right. So fats and proteins, excess levels are preventing the body from properly using sugar. And it's not sugar that's creating the problem, it's the other excess. This is how the idea that sugars are harmful to us has been pushed. The industries that are doing that, these are the dairy industry, meat industry, the seed industry or grain industry, and that they use as a means by which they can promote themselves, the 4 food groups or 5 food groups, right? It's market share, basically. All right.
And sugar has been used in modern civilization to disguise some very inappropriate foods that wouldn't otherwise be palatable or appealing to us at all, like grains. And we even put sugar on meats. We like orange flavored chicken and various fruit sauces on our meat and that sort of thing. Barbecue sauces.
That's right. The human being is attracted to foods that delight its senses. So we need flavor, sweetness, and succulence, moisture, and a bit of saltiness. And so we put that onto these abnormal foods we eat, such as meats and fats and carbohydrates, to make them taste better to us so we can swallow them. All right. We're trying basically to make these false foods taste like fruits, tropical fruits.
Right.
All right, so with our meats, we put on these sauces, sweet sauces with various stimulants in them and flavorings. Otherwise, the meat is extremely bland and unpleasant to us. If we would eat it in raw form, we reject it. It's just slimy and you can't chew it. It's too rubbery, right? We cook it to break it down. By that, we damaged it, the meat. It makes it more chewable, but it's been altered chemically. And then we throw on substances, sugars, spices, sweetener, or flavorants in order to make it swallowable.
Okay, speaking of meat, next question. High protein diets are a huge fad right now. Is there any danger in eating a high protein diet?
Yes, there's a great danger in eating a high protein diet because it acidifies the body. You're getting too much protein, which is broken down to an amino acid. The body only needs so much, so it has to get rid of that waste, which is forcing the body to do extra work. The acidity is causing organs and cell structure to break down, be replaced by scar tissue, fiber tissue. That then reduces the functionality of the body. You lose actual cell and organ structure that you need to run your body to keep it in a healthy state. So excess protein, like any excess in the body, is intoxicating to the body, just like, say, excess water would be. If you get excess water, you drown yourself. If you get excess sugar, you're getting excess fuel, and your body has to get rid of that. It's too much.
So how much protein do humans need? And is there a level at which we get too much? Obviously there is.
Yeah. Well, it's been established that the human body needs maybe 20, 30 grams of protein a day, and that's an amino acid form. The nutritional industry promotes 90, 100 grams. They have a safety factor on it, of course. They'll estimate, say it's 50 grams, but then they double it just to make sure that everyone's getting what they think is the necessary requirement. And they neglect that the body reuses most of its own protein structure, the cellular structure. Our body has about 1 million cells that are disintegrating every second and replaced by cells, adjacent cells that then replicate themselves. And those replicating cells reuse that protein from the cells that broke down. They don't need new supplies. The body doesn't throw away something just for the sake of throwing it away. It recycles. This is what life does.
And that might sound like a lot, 1 million cells, but it's really not. It's a tiny thing. It's like what, like that analogy that you've used before when you build a brick house, you don't need new bricks every day. You just need a brick here and there to make repairs. And it's very similar, right?
Yeah, that's right. The body is made of 100 trillion cells, and it 1 million cells dying every second is nothing compared to that. They're replaced, and this replacement is the process of life. Cells, their chemical structure will wear out, become changed a bit too much, and so they automatically break themselves down and are basically making them available for other cells to use to regenerate new cells.
Mm-hmm.
All this chemistry is being run by microenemas, which are DNA-containing little organelles within cells. So they're just recycling the material of cells to create new cells that are then very functional. So the dying cells isn't a bad thing for us. It's normal. It's a normal process of life. It's just that when we acidify ourselves, overwork ourselves, we're depleting ourselves of our vitality, our ability to last a long time.
Mm-hmm.
All right?
Okay, we're going to talk a little bit about evolution now. Is it possible, as some people claim, that humans have evolved into a new diet that might include meat, dairy, and eggs? Like how do we know that our bodies are still intactly frugivorous like they were obviously when we were young as a species?
Well, physiology determines your anatomy. Anatomy then also helps to run your physiology. That physiology and anatomy is part of nutrition. It's part of what you eat and how you break it down and create your energy. For a creature to need or live off a different food substance than that which it has evolved, it has to create a different anatomy and physiology that will then be appropriate for that. That would need a change, and that change takes millions of years. Constant force on it changing, you're eating new foods and slowly changing over millions of years. And humans have not had that. We've only been civilized for maybe 150, 200,000 years. We're eating cooked foods, but we haven't evolved to that. And we can see that we're not evolved to that. Our physiology has not changed. Our anatomy has not changed in the last 200,000 years. We still have the same physiology and anatomy as the great apes, for example.
Mm-hmm.
So we are not able to digest meats or grains or vegetation. We don't have the chemistry for it. We don't create the proper enzymes. We don't have the bodily features for it. And that in itself is proof these are not our normal foods. We haven't evolved. And we can see that by observation.
Right. Yeah, if you look down at your hand and you see something that looks like a cat paw or a dog paw, then you can assume that you have become an omnivore or a carnivore. But until then, you have hands that are good for grasping fruit. And all you have to do is look at your hand to know nature wouldn't put a hand appropriate for a frugivore on a species without the matching equipment inside, right?
Yeah, exactly. We don't have fangs, we don't have sharp teeth. We're not attracted to fast-moving objects. We're afraid of them.
Right.
We still love colors. We still love succulency and flavor that fruit provides. None of that has changed. Fruit is very aesthetically appealing to us. Greenery, it's all there still. Our instincts are all there for attraction to our food, which is our nutrition.
Mm-hmm.
It has not changed at all. The problem is that we just have been trained, brainwashed to think differently, to not listen to our senses, to create an intellectual reaction that's in opposition to what our senses are telling us.
Right.
That's all that has happened. A brainwashed mind.
Right. Okay, one more question about evolution. Is there real science behind evolution?
Yes, there's real science behind it. Evolution is slow change, and that can be observed. We see slow change happening all the time. For example, there's the human species, the part that went to, say, China, and they look a certain way because of their diet. And you can look at South Americans, they look a little different. They eat slightly different foods. And that causes slow change in the body. It hasn't created too much change in the human body, just slight structural features. The physiology remains the same. They're eating cooked foods, so they're experiencing disease because it's very difficult to digest. So we see that. But underneath it, the Chinese person and the South American have the same genes, the same DNA. That has not changed. Okay, so this is an example of evolution over a very short period of time. It's just more adaptation a little bit to the diet, but then you have different diseases. Now, the theory of how evolution works, that's the idea. That's not evolution itself. That's how trying to explain how those changes come about. So Darwin did that. He came up with a bunch of ideas. They're just some ideas. They're not all the ideas, right? And some of the ideas were not quite right. One of his major ideas was that the organisms compete for food in their environment, and whichever is stronger and more successful will predominate. That's sort of part of his ideas. And it's true to a degree, but that's obviously not the only thing that governs evolution, because we see many species that exist perfectly in their environment but suddenly went extinct. For what reason? Some natural disaster hit and wiped them out. But we see that there's more mechanisms involved in the change of species. They can be in a perfectly suitable environment and suddenly disappear. We see ones that are living in harsh environments but still thriving. We see species on different sides of the equator. They're the same, but they can't live in the equatorial region. So we wonder, how did that happen? How did they get on each side? They're basically the same creature. And it's not just animals, but plants doing that as well. So there is missing a mechanism underlying it that's causing all these changes. And that's what modern biology lacks, a full explanation of that. It doesn't have a driving force. But the driving force is known as crustal displacement, and causes all this force for change on life. It's always putting a force on it to adapt, change, move back to where you came from, or your environment supports you, or you die. That's the force. Mm-hmm. And this causes all kinds of different changes. All right?
Okay. So it moves the crust of the earth. This displacement process moves the crust of the earth, which causes species to move into areas that force them to adapt to new ways of finding food and digesting food and all of that. And that's happened to us a bit too.
Yeah, exactly. That's why we've civilized ourselves. We're a tropical creature, obviously. No fur, very delicate. Fruit eaters. We love greenery, a supportive, warm environment. And crustal displacement is regularly occurring. And it moved the species progressively out of the tropics. We never, as a species, can stay in there because these crustal displacements regularly happen. And so we used our intellectual abilities to study nature and create a way to live outside the tropics. This is called civilization, civilized living. We use all our discoveries from studying nature to create technologies such as animal husbandry and agriculture, creating homes and so forth, to support ourselves outside of the tropics. Mm-hmm. All other creatures are subjected to the same. If a creature cannot adapt to that change, that new environment it gets put into, then it dies. It either moves back to where their climate is the same, it has to walk, spread out, and those that don't go in that right direction die because they can't change. They can't eat the new foods, the new plants that are growing, or the new creatures that are starting to develop around them, right?
Okay.
So that crustal displacement, that's the driving force of change among species. And that then change secures life because it's so varied. You have a little change here and some gets wiped out, but there's so many different varieties, there's more chances that more is going to be able to live than die, much more.
And civilization is the reason why we are still the way we were formed when we lived in the tropics exclusively, right?
That's right.
It's
So
allowed
basically,
us to keep all of those features.
that's right. We haven't evolved new features, we retain them, and we then, with our studying in nature, try to create substances that are the same, similar to what we used to eat. These are
Right.
cooked foods. We sweeten them up and make them flavorful so we still can eat them. But we're
Right.
not told, of course, that we need to be eating our natural foods. We've gotten into eating cooked foods, and then we suffer all these diseases, and I'm explain why we have diseases, because we're eating the wrong foods, not our natural foods. If we eat our natural foods, then we experience no disease. So we can be outside the tropics, as long as we eat our natural food, we won't get disease. We still will make homes and heating systems and transportation systems and so forth, which we can use to support ourselves. We need that, but at least we won't be polluting ourselves by eating harmful foods that pollute our body by forcing it to work too hard to break it down.
Right. Okay, moving on, we're going to talk a little bit about salt now. There's a lot of hype around the various specialty salts and their supposed benefits, like Himalayan salt and sea salt. Should they be included in the diet? Is there any benefit or danger to eating these salts?
Well, these salts are crystals, whether they're condensed or precipitated out of seawater or occur as mineral in rock. And this is not our food form. Our food form is in substance that has been made by living creatures and is then in proper arrangement, vitamins, minerals, proteins, and water all combined together in a certain chemical structure that our body then can take advantage of and harmonize with its own chemical structure, which is living structure. We're not dead cooked beings. We're a living chemistry. We take living chemistry into us, modify it to create our own living chemistry. When we try to eat rocks, such as salts that have crystallized, we can't use that. It's called inorganic. It's like the supplements, that is solid crystalline material. We're not rock eaters. We're living food substance eaters.
And so we have to get ours, we do need sodium, but we have to get it from plants that have synthesized it from the soil and the sunshine and made it into a form that we can absorb and use.
Yeah, that's right. Minerals, say sodium and chloride and potassium, they're ions, they're contained naturally within the proteins and the fats and that structure of biologically produced substance. And that's then how we get them. We don't need lots of them compared to, say, sugar, carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. That's our normal way to get them. We'll get all that we need from it. We don't need any more. If we get excess, it's when you take these crystalline forms, you're polluting the body. You're putting substance in it that the body can't use, and anything it can't use is excess, and that means it's intoxicating to the body. It has to get rid of it. By taking salt supplements, you're overburdening the body. You're burdening it with something it can't use. You're forcing it to work to eliminate it. And that in itself is a chemical reaction that creates waste, which then acidifies us. We get symptoms from that then. All right?
Okay. Lauren, you want to take us into the next section here?
Yeah, thank you, Robert. I'd like to shift now into talking a little bit about how our natural diet versus eating an unnatural diet impacts our health, as well as addressing some of the common questions people have regarding the natural diet. So Robert, can you explain a little bit about how eating a biologically appropriate diet prevents and reverses disease, and how does the appropriate diet impact our internal chemistry?
Well, when we follow appropriate diet, which is part of the essentials of life, there's many habits we need to follow to allow our metabolism and body to run properly. When we eat our proper foods, it allows our body to create a proper chemistry within itself to run itself efficiently and perfectly. And that state is called health. If we want disease, which is the opposite of that, we merely have to eat the wrong types of substances, and then we don't create the correct chemistry for ourselves. In other words, we're creating acidic chemistry within us, and our body, our cells react to that. They act abnormally. So if we want disease, we have to create it by following improper life habits, the greatest one of which is to eat incorrect foods. We do most of our habits well, we follow them, but food is the one that we most abuse. So if a person has disease, that's their body merely saying, you're eating the wrong stuff. You need to eat simply of your appropriate biologically adapted foods, and thereby create a pure internal chemical environment that then your body runs well on. And so that would mean eliminating bad habits and replacing them with good habits. And then you automatically are creating health instead of abnormal behavior, which is called disease.
Okay, so when we eat foods that are not appropriate to our anatomy and physiology, we create a chemistry inside the body that is not normal and natural, which creates this discomfort, which is dis-ease, lack of ease. And then if we want to return our body back to a state of ease, back to a state of health, then we have to return our chemistry back to that state of health. And we return our chemistry back to that state of health by eating the appropriate foods which match our physiology and anatomy, correct?
Yeah, exactly. For example, if we eat excess proteins, we have to break those down to amino acids, which we'll automatically do. But then we're getting too many amino acids, that makes us too acidic, and that prevents oxygen exchange to our cells, which then can't work, and we run out of energy. And the acidity bothers our nerves, which experiences headaches, pains. We start secreting mucus because the cells create mucus to protect themselves from acidity. And then you spit out that mucus through mucous membranes, such as through your nose, your mouth, and your lungs. You're trying to get rid of waste, protect yourself from it. These are all the symptoms, so-called symptoms of disease, right? Collections of symptoms of disease. So by not polluting ourselves with excess, creating acidity, we don't create disease. When our body runs its chemistry, its metabolism is producing waste such as carbon dioxide, which I explained before. Carbon dioxide in water, which the body is 70% made of, produces carbonic acid, another acid. So if you're doing more work, unnecessary work, too much work, you've just acidified yourself. That has to be removed. It gets too high, you act symptomatically to that, your cells and your organs, and that's disease.
Okay. And so eating proteins as well, they have a lot of acidic after effects, right? From when we break down the proteins, that's adding to the acid. So if we're built for a fruit diet, which is highly alkaline with a lot of alkaline minerals, and we're taking in all of that fruit in our natural chemistry, if we not only put in an acid like eating meat, but we also are taking away that source of alkaline minerals, we're pulling ourselves well out of balance, right? We're not just putting a little bit of acid in and overworking our body, but on top of overworking our body, we are also not putting in those alkaline elements that are a natural part of our chemistry.
Yes. The digestion of fruit leads to a slightly alkaline condition of the body, and the body wants that and needs that in order to maintain its metabolism, its chemistry, its life. Now, fruits, of course, have acid substances in them, amino acids, fatty acids, and so forth. And our body creates carbon dioxide and breaking that down. But the body is evolved to get rid of any excess acids. That's waste. And so long as it doesn't have to spend too much energy breaking things down, it still has lots of energy to get rid of the waste. It's when it has to use too much of its own resources to create too much metabolism to get its energy out of food, then it oversaturates in these acidic wastes. Proteins are made of amino acids. That's an acid. So if you're taking too much protein in, you're breaking it down, creating acids too much. And if you have too much of that, beyond what you needed of these amino acids, you need to get rid of it. All right? Fatty acids, you've got too many of those, you need to get rid of them. It's making you too acidic. In foods, all foods contain nucleic acids, DNA in them. We got to break that down too. We make nuclease and deoxyribonuclease, and those are enzymes we create to break down the DNA that's in fruit and other substances. And those make nucleic acids. We only need a certain amount of those. And too many of them, we get us overly acidic. Just like if we drank too much water, we'd get overly water-filled and drown ourselves. We only need a certain amount. And so we got to be careful that we eat foods that don't have too much protein in them. So forth.
Okay, and eat foods that don't cause too much metabolic work.
Exactly. The human being is very weak digestion. It's evolved with fruit, so it doesn't produce a lot of enzymes and acids to break it down. It's easily overwhelmed by food that's difficult to digest, meaning it has to do too much metabolic work, production of CO2 and other acidic waste, to get the energy, the chemistry out of that food to run itself.
Okay, thank you. So most people suffer regular colds and flus, and it's considered a normal part of aging. Experiencing aches, pains, lowered vitality as they get older. So can sickness be completely avoided, or are symptoms of discomfort, disease, inevitable as we age?
No, disease needs to be created. Health, when you give yourself all the needs of life, is automatically created. That's our natural way. That's what we can expect. That's what we get. That's our hereditary. That's hereditary. To have disease, you actually have to overwork yourself, get too much, and pollute yourself. So we can expect, if we're children, we're given the right foods and other activities to follow, we will experience nothing but health. Any human will, no matter what age it is, in the womb or 90 years old. Once an organism is given all its needs, no more, it will produce perfect health. We can expect that, look forward to it, trust it. We could know that once we drop our bad habits that are compromising our body, not allowing it to maintain a balanced chemistry, that we will return to health, give it the body the rest that it needs to clear itself of excess. And then once we follow good habits only, it will produce nothing but good health.
Yeah, and it's so just accepted that, as we age, that we should just be in pain and discomfort. But this is something that I've actually learned and experienced firsthand with taking in the hospice and senior dogs. Is these dogs come to us in a state of disease that you would expect from a senior animal based on, what civilization tells us to expect from aging, and we put them on their species appropriate diet, and we follow the principles of natural hygiene for the dogs, and these dogs go from arthritic and slow moving and in pain and low energy to looking like puppies. And we often get comments at the dog park where people are like, "Oh, is that your puppy?" And I'm like, "Yeah, he's our dog, but he's 15, he's 16, he's not a puppy anymore." And people like just can't believe it. They're just taken aback because they expect aging to just come with disease as a natural course of things, not only in themselves, but in their pets. And then that's something that we've been able to show is absolutely not what we should expect. We should expect, even with the dogs right up to the time that they pass, we rarely see even the slightest symptom up until 24 to 48 hours before they pass, and they all pass peacefully. So it gives you a window into the world of what human health could be if we weren't so far from our natural diet.
Yeah, right.
So moving on, we kind of discussed a little bit in the B12 section about whether supplements are appropriate or not. But can we expand a little bit on, so what effect do supplements actually have on the body, and why does it sometimes appear that they work? Is it just about symptom suppression? Is it changing the chemistry of the body? Why, like if somebody is told they have a vitamin D deficiency and they start popping vitamin D pills, do some of their symptoms change?
Supplements are used much like drugs, and they alter the chemistry of the body, and you get different symptoms happening. And the ones that went away, you call that a good, and the new ones you get, you just ignore those. So supplements are concentrated chemicals, purified, turned into rocks, and they'll have that same effect as if you ate rocks or harmful substances, whether they're produced by medicine or other people. There is depending on how degraded those vitamins, minerals, and other substances have been made, there's the ability of the body to use a little bit of them, perhaps, but most of it the body will have to get rid of. So that's just burdening the body. The body can't get rid of them through its normal means. It has to store them somewhere, and that disturbs the chemistry of the body. You develop longer term problems such as cancers or yeast or fungal growth within your body from your own body. It's producing that from your own cells. You're disturbing the chemistry of the body. Supplements are not nutrition. They're not food. They're basically rock substances. We're not rock eaters. We're whole food eaters, biological food eaters.
Okay, and so basically, again, it comes back to the amount of work that we're forcing upon the body when we take these substances in that are not in usable form. We're distracting the body, and so some of these symptoms that people are treating with supplements are actually the body attempting to correct its chemistry, attempting to rid disease. So like fatigue.
Yeah.
The energy is going internally to clean itself, and so we're getting fatigued on the external energy, and we're then taking these supplements to try to boost our energy, but really all we're doing is just so overwhelming the body that it can't clean itself, and we're changing the chemistry so that the symptom shows up in a different way, which we then call side effects. But really they're just the same as pharmaceutical drugs. They're just a poisoning effect, right?
Yes, exactly. The way we're suffering disease, we're taking in excess, we're overburdening our body then it tires out, our nervous system tires out, and we cannot get rid of the excess waste, and that causes us to over acidify or intoxicate ourselves. And to that higher level of waste, our cells react, and those are called symptomatic reactions in enormous variety. So when we're suffering problems, weakness or so forth, where we think we need a supplement, in reality, we're eating the wrong food that's overburdening our body. And once we return to proper nutrition or proper foods, which is fruit and vegetables, nuts, seeds, then our body creates the perfect chemistry and perfect balance to operate as health, at ease, at health.
Okay, thank you, Robert. So I'd like to move into a little bit of what some other primary focuses of disease causation that we hear about in the mainstream. One of the biggest ones that we hear about is emotions causing disease. There's even some schools of thought out there where people are saying that it is the emotional shock of a traumatic event that is causing cancer in people. So one, is it possible for emotions to cause disease? And two, is there any validity to emotional shocks causing like cancers or extreme diseases?
No, emotions don't cause disease. The cause of disease has been clearly established to be the overpollution of the body in its own waste or poisons that have been taken into the body, preventing the body from operating normally. Now, emotions are increased activity of the body, metabolic activity, and you sense that as your feelings. So you can have feelings of joy or sadness and so forth. And when you express them, we call that emoting. So emotional expression is just like physical expression. It's the same. It's an activity of body. Thinking is an activity. Running is an activity. Emoting is an activity. Feeling yourself inside, how much energy you're processing, that's an activity. That activity doesn't cause disease. That's normal. Your body, that's a normal operation of the body. It's only when the body becomes overwhelmed in its own waste and other waste that's been injected or ingested into it that prevents it from operating normally that experiences disease. You can run up a hill and you can get tired and you're producing waste. So you rest and let your body catch up on eliminating waste, restoring some fuels, and then you can progress. And so it is with emotional expression. You can express emotions. You can be excited or sad, and your body's creating metabolism to do that, and it produces waste. And so once you give yourself rest, it'll remove the waste, and you're back to normal. What you've done exists only as you've done it. It doesn't hold on and make you suffer sometime later. It's in the moment. All right. Running, when you run now. That running that you ran now isn't hanging around to make you feel bad in 10 years from now. All right. The body can heal if it hurt itself, did too much in the moment, and then it's back to normal. It's like you cut yourself and it heals. And that you cut yourself there doesn't affect you when 10 years down the road, when you try to use, say, your finger that you cut, it's healed. Well, emotions do not cause disease. We can remember extreme emotions, fear and so forth, and that can then make us shy about acting in a certain way or getting into certain circumstances, but that's not disease. That's just memory. Then you can create instinctive behavior, you could say, by memory, not doing that activity that overburdened you or made you feel bad or that you didn't like. So emotions can cause disease no more than walking can cause disease or thinking can cause disease. Emoting too much can lead you to, say, jump off a cliff, or you feel so bad you want to commit suicide. But that's not a disease. That's just an action of ending your life, or jumping off a cliff or making mistakes. That in itself is not disease. All right, you understand?
Yes. So can what we eat cause or trigger emotions like anxiety, or just because we're feeling distress within our digestive system? Can we trigger emotional reactions based on improper foods going in?
Yes, well, the foods are what are predominantly causing our over acidity or over pollution in our own waste, reducing our energy. And by that, we feel bad. We feel low in energy. We feel irritated. We we get emotional. We can become moody, as it said. This is just our body, our nerves being irritated by substances within us. We're not able to create enough energy to, say, get out of the way of someone or something that's irritating us, and we just burst out in anger, something like that. All right.
Just somewhat related. Can stress cause disease? So if we're in a state of, say, chronic stress from a stressful relationship or a stressful job, a lot of people are talking about how they're getting cancer because they are in a stressful relationship, or their day-to-day life, having to commute to the city, is causing so much stress that it's what caused their cancer or their chronic disease. So is stress a viable avenue to create disease?
What's creating disease, of course, is overpollution and waste. And if you're doing activities, any activity that causes the body to do that, that'll contribute to that state. Cooked food being by far and away the greatest method by which we can do that. stress is normal to the body. When you walk, that's putting stress on the body. When you eat food, that's putting stress on the body. But it's a good stress. It needs that. We can go to work and overwork. That's not good. That won't cause necessarily disease. It can wear the body out in a way, overworking organs, not allowing them to replenish themselves or repair themselves after they've been used too much. And then you become less able. We don't want to be worrying too much, which we would call stress. It's overburdening those brain cells that have to resolve that. We don't want to unnecessarily be or worrying about things we don't really need to worry about. And those aren't creating disease. They're just creating false behaviors or habits or annoyances, you could say. It's not disease. It won't create symptoms other than itself not liking that type of behavior, right? It's like if there's a lion sitting there always around you, that's very stressful because you're afraid it's going to kill you. Well, the solution is if you remove the lion and then you can relax again. When we eat cooked foods and pollute our body, it prevents our body from creating energy to resolve any problem we have. We have less energy, and so any activity we might do, we're going to do less of it. And if we do a bit too much, it'll pollute our cells a bit too much, and we get little symptoms such as moodiness or weakness or something like that. Just such as you could, if you don't have enough energy, you pollute yourself and you go and try and do a walk, and then you start to feel sick because you produced a little bit more waste that just put you over that threshold, just too acidic. And then you might vomit. People do that often if they haven't exercised much and they go to the gym, they work out for 2 hours and suddenly they're sick. And that's just because they overpolluted themselves from that activity. Their body wasn't built up to do that. It didn't develop the muscles and the circulation to be able to get rid of waste that it's producing while it's doing the activity. All right. So it's a matter really just of respecting what your body can do in any activity. All right, not overdoing it that way. The activity won't create disease. It won't create overpollution, constant overpollution. It may just create a bit too much pollution, but the body easily gets rid of that, provided it's given just a little bit of rest.
And probably one place where this comes from is why stress is associated with disease so much is because people's response to their stress, like doctors are as a group supposed to be very unhealthy, and it doesn't have to do with their stress. It has to do with how they respond to their stress. So they're very busy. They just grab whatever they can to eat. They'll, they take drugs and suppressants when they get a symptom. When they're worried in the evening, they'll have a drink. I mean, this is all very common behavior among people who have stressful occupations. So stress then becomes associated with disease, but it's not the stress, it's the response to it, right?
Yeah. People will get stressed and they may reach for food to create a different feeling. And so they're using food as a drug to manipulate how their feelings and thereby polluting themselves more. By eating improperly, a person will create an acidic environment in the body, a prolonged, constant environment, and that's irritating the whole body and causes it to start breaking down. And that's often experienced as anxiety and depression. The body's inability to create energy to run its daily tasks. Right. It feels hopeless then. But if that person cleans up their diet, they then have lots of energy. They're feeling normal, full of activity, and these previous problems or activities that they thought were problems or jobs they had to do where they had not enough energy then become simple and enjoyable for them. Right. And so suddenly their anxiety and depression is gone. Depression meaning lack of energy. Anxiety meaning worry about having enough energy to do that job, basically.
All right.
Very interesting.
Okay, the last section of questions. Thanks to a good deal of commercial propaganda, there's a lot of controversy surrounding human nutrition. So the following questions are about a few of the more controversial or misunderstood aspects of the natural hygiene diet or the fruit-centered diet. First question is, what is real hunger and how is it confused with addiction withdrawal?
Well, the body has many senses, such as sight and hearing and smell. And hunger is one of them too, as well as thirst. And so the body gives a signal when it wants nutrition, and it doesn't come with feelings, it just with a knowing. It's like opening your eyes and seeing and realizing. And so that's what hunger will be. Your body in general throughout has developed a need for nutrition to come in so that the body can stock itself up with fuel again to be prepared for the activities of next day. Now, hunger will not come in any kind of discomforting feeling. Most people today, or probably all people, associate their discomforting feelings with hunger. For example, pain in the stomach, or a hollow stomach, or a headache, or weakness. And these are actually symptoms of toxicity, of overaccumulated waste in their body, which is irritating nerves. And so the stomach, by being forced to digest too much food, it tires itself out. The body itself, the tissues become oversaturated in waste, and the nerves around the stomach sense that and experience it as pain. Tissues of the stomach have become irritated by the excess waste. They've been harmed, cut, and irritated by the acids, and the nerves pick that up, and that's the pain, that's the hunger pang, or the hollowness. Now, a person can eat and stimulate their glands, their whole body to work faster, and thereby get out of the feeling of that pain. It's like whipping a horse that's tired. It'll be forced to work harder. Work is accomplished by creating hormones in the body, the various glands. Those hormones rush through the body, incite the liver and the muscles, the stomach, and so forth to work harder. And those hormones are experienced by the brain as well, and it gets a high out of that. And that's a good feeling. Adrenaline's rushing through your brain. That's a nice feeling. And so that improved feeling they associate with having overcome their hunger. They think their hunger has gone away. They satisfied their hunger by doing that false activity, false stimulation, when they are actually in pain. They need to look at those pangs, those hollow feelings, as if they had cut themselves. There's pain there, and instinctively we know not to use that until the pain is gone. There's some healing done. The internal mucous membranes of the body heal quite rapidly. They're not like the skin on the outside. These are much thinner. And so they'll heal quicker if you injure them. And so if you just give it that time, the nerves will not be irritated anymore. And that's the signal. Oh, I don't have the feeling, these pain feelings, but I do have this urge to eat. It's just the knowingness I need to eat, and then you eat. That's true hunger. There's no dryness of throat associated with hunger or weakness, or no uncomfortable sensation. It's just a knowing, just as if you'd open your eyes and realize something, what you're seeing in front of you. It's just a normal, pleasant, non-feeling sensation.
So any physical symptom we can know for sure is not hunger. And the way that we know that absolutely is that when people change their diets and start eating appropriately, they stop having those symptoms. And also even normal standard American diet eaters who go off and fast for extended periods, they get to day 2 or 3 and those feelings go away.
Yeah,
And that
exactly.
wouldn't happen if it was hunger. If it was hunger, they would get worse as they go through the stages of fasting.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's right. And when I was young, I ate tons. Every morning I'd wake up with the growling, painful stomach. And I thought there was hunger, so I'd eat a ton and it would go away. And now that I improved my diet, I never get hunger pains or hollow stomach or weakness. I just know that I'm hungry. I like to eat in the afternoon, and I just know. And it's a nice feeling. I don't have to eat right away. I could delay it for a day if I wanted. All right? No sensations to it. It's just a knowing. It's like you could open your eyes now, or you could shut them and open them later. You'll get it.
Right. Okay, next question has to do with colonics, which is a controversial topic. Are colonics or enemas healthy or beneficial?
Well, enemas and colonics are unnatural, usually harmful to us. They possibly could be useful in emergency situations where a person has collected a lot of dried feces in their body and the body can't, by its muscular effort, get it out. But that's emergency, right? You're helping a person that's obviously done something incorrect in their life. Now, the bowel is an organ in the body that removes water and electrolytes or minerals, sodium and so forth, from the food it's been digesting in the small intestine. The bowel doesn't absorb nutrients, all right? And so people have gotten into using colonics to flush that waste out, but they're not, it's not necessary. The body can do it. If it stays in the body, it just means the body, it doesn't matter to the body, all right? It can collect more, and then when it's built up enough pressure, the body will get rid of it. So these colonics and enemas, they're trying to force health on the body, trying to clean the body out somehow from the inside, when the body will clean its own self out according to its own needs. It'll produce waste and get rid of it through its normal eliminative organs, the liver, the bladder, the kidneys, the skin, and the lungs. That's how it normally does it. When it goes to disease, it's over-acidic, and then the body uses other organs extraneously or in substitute to try and get rid of that excess acidity waste. So we get pimples on our skin and rashes and bad breath and various other symptoms. All right.
And this dried mucus that lines the intestines or mucoid plaque or whatever, if it exists, the body put it there for a reason, right? And the body can break it down as it stops needing it.
Yeah. Yeah, if the body has a substance there like that plaque, it's actually protecting the body from whatever is inside the gut that shouldn't be there in the first place. That's how you need to realize it, see it.
Right.
Not that it's harming the body. It's that the person is indulged in the wrong foods, which have resulted in the body creating this plaque or a substance, mucus, whatever, to overcome the poor breakdown of that food, the excess proteins that are in it or fats and whatever.
Mm-hmm. Okay, next question. Is it important to eat all organic as opposed to conventionally grown foods?
Well, one wants to eat nutrient-rich food. We don't have to eat organic because conventional foods have lots of nutrients in them. The problem actually is we're getting too much food, the wrong types of food, overburdening the body. There are some foods, an example being, say, bananas, that are more flavorful and better ripened when they're organically grown because they use so many chemicals in conventional.
You mean organic is better than conventional?
Yeah, organic is better than conventional, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can look at, say, lettuces. Conventional are sprayed a lot more, so they have more toxic substances on them, whereas organically grown lettuce doesn't. In that they use natural substances produced by bacteria and so forth to control insect infestation. So it's not more natural chemical, but still usage of chemicals. It's not petroleum chemicals. Now, the problem with organic foods, particularly fruit, is that it's never brought to the market fresh. It's always unripe. So it's just as bad as regular fruit. What's important about fruit is that you eat it ripe. So it's broken down into its proper amino acids, fatty acids, and other nutrients. If you eat unripe fruit, you're eating substance that your body can't digest very well. It's too acidic, it's bitter, and it burdens the body. And that it leads to disease. You're not getting the nutrition you need. You're not creating the metabolism you need. So you just eat fruit that's ripe. It can be non-organic or conventional. When foods are sprayed, those are very dilute sprays, and they generally wash off. Fruit aren't sprayed every day. It's just 1, 2, 3 times a year, and that gets washed off. as best as can be. Some might get into the fruit, but generally we're peeling our fruit, so we're not eating that substance that's on the surface. And of course, organic fruit won't have any on it other than pollution from the air, which has a lot of pollutants in it. But with organic, if you're not properly enriching your soil, you're still going to get depleted foods that aren't as rich as they could be. But like I said, all foods have plenty of nutrients in them. And if they're growing, then that means they have everything that's in them. And their body doesn't need a lot of nutrients. It needs mainly sugars and water, and then some low levels of nutrients. In the human, in our diet today, we're getting way too many nutrients, especially proteins and fats, excess. Right. And that's creating our problems.
Right. Not the trace pesticides or whatever. I think a lot of people have the idea that it's better to eat some organic, biologically inappropriate food than a conventionally grown, piece of produce or something. And there are actually lots of good reasons for people to not eat organic. The financial part alone is burdensome because very often organic is 3 or 4 times the price of conventional. And it doesn't turn over in the store as fast as conventional produce. So the selection is better with conventional produce. I've found that I had to open myself up to conventional and organic just in order to find sufficient ripe, edible food out there in the marketplace.
Yeah, exactly. Our bodies have ability to get rid of poisonous waste. There's poisons from volcanoes and so forth in the air all the time. And so we've adapted to that. We have ability to get rid of ingested noxious substance. If it's on vegetables, we'll be able to do that as well, sprayed vegetables. And all that being said, we do want to get them vegetables that are grown the best, right? So you'd want to get, in reality, or fruit from nature itself. Go out in the woods and pick your fruit, and you have those opportunities to do that. And second best is our agricultural products of fruit, the orchards and so forth. And then foods that are absolutely proper for us, so that's primarily fruit. All right.
Okay. 2 more questions. The next one has to do with the natural human lifespan. How long is the natural human lifespan supposed to be, and how has this been determined?
Well, the natural lifespan of the human is at least 120. We have even today people that eat cooked food all their lives, living as old as, say, 115, 116, 117. So they, in eating cooked foods all the time, overwork their body. They've eaten minimally. There's no gourmand that lives that long. It's just demonstration that as long as you just give yourself what you need, you'll wear your body out the least and last the longest. Of course, how long you live depends on your hereditary, how you were fed within the womb, and how much of a vitality, how well your organs grew in the womb, and then are able to live for a long time without wearing out. That's variable. A person, 2 people, one with equal vitality, equal organ strength, one could live to 90 if they don't overeat, whereas the other one might only live to 60 because they wore themselves out by eating too much, forcing too much work on their body and wearing it out. All right. Now, there's been experiments done such as on chicken hearts, and as long as they're given what they need, that chicken heart, and kept clean, it lives like 30 years. There was an experiment done, I read about once. The person just ended this, researcher just ended the experiment because the chicken heart had lived so long. It lived like 20 or 30 years. He had just kept it clean. It's demonstrating that when an organism is given all its needs perfectly, it can live a long time. And for the human, it's estimated that it would probably be, on average, maybe 120 years, 130 years. And longest lived would maybe be 160 if they looked after themselves perfectly.
Is there any validity to that calculation that I've heard a long time ago about the age, the average lifespan is determined, is generally when we look out into the animals, we see that it's 7 times the age at sexual maturity.
Yeah.
Is that valid?
I mean, it has some validity to it. The length of time that it's maturing or growing into an adult is determining how robust, strong, how much vitality that organ has. When you mature earlier, you're not developing that. You're quickly developing to a certain state, and then at that point, it has a certain amount of life it can live.
Mm-hmm.
But within the species, it varies a lot. We can have turtles that live like 300 years or 200 years or whatever they live, right? It depends. There's many factors that determine it.
Okay. And last question. Finally, let's talk a little bit about how science has been corrupted by industry. Robert, can you explain how science differs from modern scientism and how the latter has been manipulated and misused commercially and politically?
Yeah. Well, today, science is the study of nature to see how it works. And then you invent technologies based on that to serve the human. And we've studied biology, see how the body works, physiology, anatomy. We can determine what it needs beyond just food, but it's other habits of life. Now, when there are groups that come about, they want to profit off of that, make money, such as dairy or grain industry or milk, the meat industry. They focus on certain scientific data or knowledge and promote it, that little point, and not revealing the true full picture. By advertising that, they promote their own product, such as meat. It's true that the human being needs protein, but they don't tell you how much it needs. They just say meat contains protein, protein's needed, therefore buy our product, make a lot of money off it. The reality is that human needs very little protein. And if they tell you that, then you go look for things that don't have much protein in it, and that'd be fruit. So we see industries cherry picking science, giving science a bad name, claiming as if they are following science, but they're not. They're just cherry picking knowledge and using that to give them the false appearance that they are scientific. And that's called scientism, abusing science, sort of pillaging science, a little bit of it, misrepresenting it, not giving the full picture, and by that, promoting themselves and their own product to create profit for themselves.
Right. And that's what we hear mostly. We hear mostly propaganda and commercialism. It's just called science to give it a good name, because pure science is something we can follow.
Right. Science is an investigation of nature, like I said, and our senses do that. It's looking at nature and seeing what we want to use as food, how we need to behave. That's the ultimate science.
Yep.
Our nature has evolved that way, and so we can trust our bodies with our senses to tell us what we need to do, what practices we need to follow. We don't need to take microscopes and analyze and pick out little parts of it and say this is more important than that part, or and so forth. All right, we are nature investigating bodies ourselves in our innate structure. We do that via our senses. You can trust those senses. They've understood the infinite complexity of, say, fruit, or how the rest of nature works. They figure it out automatically. We don't have to do that. That's within our chemical structure. All right, we don't need to know the details. We just know the big visual details, and then react to our senses, which is our brain interpreting what our senses are saying, and then following what they're saying we need to do.
Gotcha. Okay. Thanks, Robert.
Thank you, Nora and Robert. We hope that you've enjoyed this video and it has provided you with the information you need to be empowered to take control of your health. True health information has no products to sell and makes no money for anyone who shares it. Our only agenda is to help empower people to their health by sharing these simple, unbiased, objective truths. If you would like to research the information provided in this video, please take a look at the links in the description box, which will help you further your understanding and empower yourself back to health. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. Our next video will be on transitioning, how to practically apply all of the knowledge shared in this video to go from your current diet back to the natural human diet gradually and as effectively as possible. Thank you for watching today. Eat fruit and be well.